High on the Tibetan plateau, along the Upper Yellow River in Qinghai Province, China is raising a concrete dam nearly 590 feet tall, about the height of a skyscraper, and almost no human hands are laying it down. If you want to catch the next breakthrough before everyone else does, subscribe and turn on notifications. Now picture the site itself. It sits in some of the thinnest, harshest air on Earth, roughly 3,000 meters up, where every breath gives you less oxygen than you are used to, and the weather can turn on you in an afternoon. And across that barren, wind-scoured ground, a fleet of machines is moving. Driverless bulldozers, rollers, pavers, trucks hauling material. They roll in coordinated formation, spacing themselves, taking turns, laying the structure down band by band, all of them reporting back to one central brain, one system coordinating the whole dance. The handful of people actually on the mountain. Most of them are inside a small control cabin, watching monitors, not holding shovels, watching screens while the machines do the building. This is the Yangqu Dam. And it is real. It is being built right now, and it looks like almost nothing we have ever done before. If you have ever watched a story like this break and thought, why did no one see this coming? Keep listening, because this is exactly that moment happening in real time. By the end of this, you are going to understand precisely how you print a wall the size of a mountain, layer by layer, with a crew you could fit in a single room. But first, let's sit with just how strange this is, because for the last 100 years, the biggest dams on Earth were monuments to human muscle, not machines, people, tens of thousands of them. The Hoover Dam, the Three Gorges. These were built by armies of workers over years, sometimes the better part of a decade. You didn't just build the dam. You built entire temporary towns to house the crews, feed them, keep them alive. A mega project wasn't one structure. It was a small civilization that appeared, did its brutal work, and vanished. So the obvious question forms almost on its own. How do you 3D print something the size of a mountain? And maybe the sharper question underneath it, if this is possible, why did no one do it before? I know what you're thinking. Surely there was a good reason nobody built a dam this way before. There was. 3 of them. Start with the altitude. At 3,000 meters on the Tibetan plateau, every single extra worker is a logistics nightmare. Thin air means altitude sickness, real, dangerous, slowing everyone down. It means you have to truck in food, water, shelter, oxygen, medical care for thousands of people, up to a place that fights you every step of the way. The more humans you need on that mountain, the more the whole thing threatens to collapse under its own weight before a single wall goes up. Second wall, the weather and the isolation. This is not a construction site outside a city. It is remote, exposed, and merciless. Cold, wind, storms that shut everything down. Every person you put up there is one more life you have to protect against a place that was never meant to hold a crowd. And the third wall is the quietest, but it is the one that really matters. Precision. When tens of thousands of people are pouring and packing concrete by hand, over years, you get human error. Uneven layers. Weak seams where one pour met the next. Tiny inconsistencies that, in a wall this tall holding back this much water, become cracks. And cracks are what shorten a dam's life, or end it. A mountain-high wall cannot afford to lose precision. And precision is the one thing a giant human crew, exhausted and freezing at 3,000 meters, is worst at delivering. And here's the thing most people miss. A story like this one isn't a one-off. This dam is a signal. By the time a project like Yangqu reaches the news, the real shift has already happened, quietly, months or years earlier. And almost nobody connected the dots in advance. That gap between the moment the shift really happens and the moment you hear about it is exactly what the China signal was built to close. It's a strategic guide that decodes what China is actually building, sector by sector: energy, infrastructure, manufacturing, trade, so you can spot the early signals of a major shift before the crowd ever does. It turns a story like this printed megadam into a pattern you can actually read. If you want to stop being surprised by these, the link is in the description. So now you can see why the fleet on that mountain isn't a gimmick. It isn't showing off. It is the answer to a wall that stopped everyone else cold. The altitude, the danger, and above all, the precision that a human crew simply cannot hold at this scale. Which brings us to the part that actually sounds impossible. The machines climb. They spread a layer. They compact it. Then they climb again and repeat. But how a fleet of trucks and rollers actually prints a solid wall the size of a mountain, layer by layer, without a single seam failing, that is the thing nobody quite explains. And it is stranger and simpler than it sounds. The printing itself, that is the part that sounds impossible, and it is the part that is actually simple. Forget a giant nozzle squeezing out plastic. Picture instead how you'd frost a cake in flat, even bands, one smooth layer at a time. Here is what the software does first. It takes the full digital design of the dam, all 590 feet of it, and slices it into thin horizontal layers, top to bottom, like cutting a loaf of bread into hundreds of even slices. Each slice is a single flat band the machines have to lay down. Spread one band. Press it flat. Climb up a few inches. Spread the next one right on top. Do that a few thousand times, and a mountain of concrete grows out of the valley floor, band by band by band. Let that sit for a moment. The same idea that lets you ice a birthday cake is building a wall taller than most office towers. But the concrete itself is not what you are probably imagining. When you think of concrete, you think of that wet gray soup pouring out of a truck and sloshing into a mold. This is not that. This is something called roller compacted concrete, and the name basically tells you how it works. It is a stiff, almost dry mix, closer to damp sand or wet gravel than to the runny stuff on a sidewalk pour. You cannot pour it because it barely flows. Instead, you spread it out in a flat layer, and then you press it down, hard, with a heavy roller until it locks together into solid rock. Spread, then crush. Spread, then crush. It is faster than the wet stuff. It uses less water, and it is exactly the kind of material a machine can handle without a human babysitting every bucket. And the machines. This is where it stops being ordinary construction. There is no single robot doing the work. There is a whole fleet, and the fleet behaves like one organism. Unmanned trucks haul the stiff concrete in. Driverless bulldozers and pavers push it out into that flat, even band. Then the rollers move in behind them and compact it down. The trucks feed the pavers feed the rollers, and the moment one layer is finished, the entire formation climbs up onto it and starts the next one. No coffee break, no shift change, no 1,000 people shouting over engines. Every machine is reporting back to one central brain, an AI that knows where every vehicle is and what the next move is. Picture a colony of ants that all share a single mind, laying a wall the height of a skyscraper. Now you might be wondering how they keep it that precise, because this is the whole reason it works. Remember the problem from a remote, oxygen-thin site. Human crews get tired, they misjudge, and you end up with uneven layers, weak seams, cracks that shave years off a dam's life. The fix is satellite positioning. Every single machine on that surface is guided from space, the same basic technology that tells your phone where you are, except tuned to a level of precision no tired human could match. Each pass of each roller is placed exactly where the design says it should go, down to the centimeter. So the seams that used to come from human error simply do not get made. The machine does not get altitude sickness. It does not lose focus at hour 11. It just lays the line perfectly and climbs. So who is actually behind this? The reveal traces back to researchers tied to Tsinghua University, one of China's top engineering schools, and through Chinese state media, they described the Yangqu project as the world's first fully automated construction of a dam at this scale, a structure built layer by layer, largely by robots, with completion targeted around 2024. That is the claim. And it is a big one. Okay, but is this real, or is it just a press release? Fair question. Here is what cannot be walked back. And I want to be honest with you, because that matters more than hype. A lot of this framing comes straight through Chinese sources, so a little healthy skepticism is not just allowed, it is the smart move. The words fully autonomous may be doing some heavy lifting. There were almost certainly humans in the loop, supervising, correcting, stepping in. The finished, hands-off reality might be more aspiration than the headline suggests. But strip the adjectives away and look at what is left. The site on the upper Yellow River exists. The fleet of driverless machines is real. The roller-compacted concrete is going down in layers, guided from orbit at 3,000 meters. The direction of this thing cannot be reversed. Whether it is 90% automated or 99%, the shovel is being taken out of human hands, and it is not going back in. And that is the moment the story cracks wide open. Because if a coordinated fleet of trucks and rollers can raise a wall the height of a skyscraper with barely a person on the ground, then the question stops being about one dam in Qinghai province. It stops being about hydropower at all. Yes, Yangqu matters on its own. It feeds China's push for clean energy, sending electricity thousands of miles east to the cities that need it. That alone is a big deal. But the thing that should really make American builders and European engineering firms sit up straight is not the power. It is what happens to the cost and the timeline of every mega project on Earth once the crew is a fleet instead of 100,000 people. That number is the part nobody has priced in yet. That number, the cost of a mega project once the crew is a fleet instead of 100,000 people, is where this stops being a China story and becomes everyone's story. Because the most expensive part of building anything enormous has always been the people and the years. Not the concrete, not the steel, the people. Think about what a giant project actually swallows. Wages for thousands of workers, month after month. Housing for them. Food, water, medical tents, safety crews. And time, which is its own kind of money. Because every extra year a dam sits half-finished is another year before it earns back a single cent. That is the mountain nobody outside the industry ever really sees. And on the Yangqu site, a fleet of driverless bulldozers, rollers, and pavers, all reporting to one central brain, is quietly carving that mountain down toward nothing. Now follow that thread out past this one dam. If a machine fleet can lay down a wall the height of a skyscraper, layer by layer, in the thin, oxygen-starved air 3,000 meters up on the Tibetan plateau, then the same logic does not stop at dams. It runs straight into roads, bridges, power plants, ports, anything huge, anything repetitive, Anything where the old answer was always the same. Throw more human bodies at it. Cut the crew to a handful of technicians watching screens, and you do not shave a little off the bill. You gut it. Both halves of it, the cost and the calendar, at the same time. And here is where I want to be careful, because this is the part that should make a lot of people sit up. Not with panic, with attention. American builders, the big construction outfits in the United States, and the European engineering firms, the ones in Germany and France that still plan every mega project around enormous human crews, should be watching this site very closely. And I want to be fair to them, because they are not foolish for building the old way. They built it the old way for good reasons. Union labor, safety codes written in blood over a century, legal liability, the plain fact that until very recently, a machine simply could not judge and adjust the way a skilled foreman can. They had every reason. The ground under those reasons is just starting to move. So why does any of this reach you, sitting wherever you are? Because construction cost is not a local number. When one country figures out how to build the biggest things on Earth faster and cheaper than anyone else, it does not keep that advantage at home. It exports it. It bids on the highway in Africa, the port in Asia, the rail line in South America, and it wins because it can name a price and a finish date that a 100,000 worker approach simply cannot touch. That reshapes global construction costs, who wins the contracts, and in the end, who can even afford to build the future at all. This is not abstract. This is the invisible plumbing underneath every big thing that gets built in the next 20 years. And Yangqu is not some one-off showpiece to prove a point. That is the part that ties it all together. This dam plugs straight into China's hydropower and clean energy grid. The whole reason it exists is to turn the fall of the upper Yellow River into electricity, and then send that power sent thousands of miles east, across the country, to the coastal cities that actually burn it. So look at what is really happening here. The automation makes the dam cheaper and faster to build, and the finished dam feeds the energy push, and the energy push funds the next round of automated mega projects. The machines and the power feed each other. That is a loop, and once a loop like that starts spinning, it is very hard to slow down. Now, the honest part. One last time, because I promised you an honest read and not a cheerleading session. The grandest claim here, that this was fully, start-to-finish autonomous construction with the humans reduced to spectators, still deserves a raised eyebrow. A lot of that framing comes through Chinese sources tied to Tsinghua University, and the fully autonomous label may be more where they are aiming than exactly where they have already landed. Fair enough. But strip the language back to what cannot be argued. The site is real. The driverless fleet is real. The layer-by-layer method is real, and it works. The direction is undeniable. You cannot unbuild a machine that already knows how to stack a dam. Try to picture it this way. The single biggest cost in building almost anything huge has always been human. The wages, the years, the sheer weight of thousands of people. Now imagine that cost falling towards zero. Let that sit for a moment. That is not a small saving. That is the floor dropping out from under the entire economics of construction. And think back to where we started. For 100 years, the 100,000-worker dam looked permanent, like a law of nature. Giant projects meant giant armies of people, entire towns thrown up just to house the crews, years of labor measured in human lifetimes. That was simply how the biggest things on Earth got made. Now a wall the height of a skyscraper is rising in the thin mountain air, layer by patient layer, like frosting bands stacked on a cake, and there is almost no one down there holding a shovel. A single technician on a vast, quiet site where 100,000 people used to be. This is how technology curves work. They look flat for a very, very long time. Decades. A century. Long enough that you start to believe the flat part is just the way things are. Forever. And then, all at once, they are not flat at all. That is the moment we are standing in right now, and almost no one has noticed the line has already bent. So let me hand this one to you. Which industry do you think gets automated first? Construction, shipping, mining? Drop your answer below and tell me why.